So, my apologies for the delay, and thank you for your patience. My name is Jules Attard, as I said. I'm a Master Black Belt here at 100% Effective. And I'd like to thank you for your time, spending your time here with us today. Um, Before we get started, I will cover off some admin for this webinar. I'll answer any questions you have at the end of the call. Some of you have already discovered the chat function to tell me that you couldn't hear me, so you already know about it, but please type any questions you have in the bottom left corner and I'll see them and either cover them immediately if it's something to do immediately, or at the Q&A section at the end of this webinar. You can also join the discussion live on Twitter using the hashtag 100PCBizChat. A copy of this webinar will be available to download from our website shortly after it ends. Great. So, for decades, we've worked using Lean and Six Sigma on making our factory floor and our office staff more productive. We've constantly been looking at ways to ensure that they don't waste any time, and whole libraries of books have been written explaining how to remove all the non-value added activities from their work so that they're close to 100% effective. Managers are the most expensive people resources in a business, but actually very little is being said about their productivity. Unlike lower level staff, managers are given very little training in how to do their work. In fact, many managers take delight that they can find their own way to complete a job. However, this is a bit like driving from London to Birmingham without a map. It's certainly a very exciting way to travel, and it's likely to lead you to unexpected places, but it might not be the fastest or the most consistent way to get there. So, in this webinar, I intend to show you how the application of a few straightforward lean concepts can lead to a step change in your productivity as a manager. As I mentioned, I will answer any questions at the end of the webinar, but do please type them into the chat box as I go along. Before we get started, let's look at one of the fundamental lean concepts, the difference between waste and value. Work adds value if the customers care about it, if they consider it important, or they would pay for it, or they would complain if it's not being done. Everything else is waste, in a simplistic view. In a lean process, we seek to eliminate or at least reduce waste. In fact, very little of the work that is done by managers actually handles the product being made or delivers a service to the customer. So most or all of the work done by a manager is actually waste in that definition. Some of it is, of course, essential for the functioning of a business, but some of it is not. We would like to streamline and reduce the time taken to do the non-essential work and the essential work rather, and completely eliminate the non-essential work. Unfortunately, it's not always very easy to distinguish between these two types of work. It's always an interesting exercise for any manager to write down what they actually do, and I recommend you do this once you've listened to this webinar. Some of the tasks will be immediately recognizable as waste. For example, hunting for information to put in a report is waste. If the CEO didn't read every page and chart in your report or presentation that you send as a pre-read, then the time you spent preparing it was wasted. So the first thing you can do to increase your productivity is by stopping doing those things that aren't valued. Standardize the storage of information so you don't lose time hunting for it. Agree clear requirements with the recipients of your report so that you only include what they need. Some of your tasks won't be so easy to recognize for the waste that they are, but in this talk I'll suggest some other wastes which you will be able to find in your work and then eliminate. Managers spend an amazing amount of their working week in meetings. In some companies, they seem to spend all their week either in a meeting or preparing for one. Some managers take a genuine delight in this actually, but many others consider the meetings as an unproductive waste of time. They watch the clock, waiting to get back to their desk so they can get on with some real work. Yet in most professions, working as a team is known to be much more powerful than working alone. So meetings are necessary, but we need to make them more productive. When we ask managers what problems they have with meetings, many of those problems relate to the process of the meeting, how the meeting was prepared, delivered, and then followed up. For example, no decision was reached because the right people couldn't attend or they couldn't get there on time. As a result, the decision had to be postponed until a time when they could join, or it was taken offline, which meant there was no opportunity to review the decision as a group. Another problem might be that the pre-work delivered for the meeting was incomplete. Once again, this would prevent the decision being taken. It could be, and is often the case, that no actions or minutes are issued from the last meeting. So everybody has a different memory of what was actually agreed in the previous meeting. And perhaps that explains why the pre-work for this meeting wasn't done properly. Another problem will be that the pre-work was delivered, but it wasn't used, or all of it wasn't used. So more was prepared than was actually needed to reach the decision. Perhaps this happens as a reaction to the previous meeting. So when you don't do enough pre-work for one meeting and can't reach a decision, the natural reaction is to over-prepare for the following meeting. A fifth problem can be that the meeting doesn't have an agenda, or the agenda isn't followed, and therefore the meeting overruns. And because the last meeting overran, some of the people at your meeting arrive late. This prevents a decision being reached when you were trying to, which of course is where we began the problems. Using lean concepts, each one of these wastes can be eliminated. No person should be a bottleneck. So if you find yourself unable to reach decisions because some key people can't attend, you should find deputies. This might not be quick and easy to do because the deputies need to have the authority to reach decisions, and therefore it could take time to identify and train them. However, no manager should be able to hold up a decision through their lack of availability. If the pre-work for a meeting wasn't completed or has been over-prepared, you can overcome this by ensuring you've shared clear expectations. So, for example, if all the agenda items are similar, which is what often happens in a project review meeting, standardizing the expectations so that all pre-work is completed to the same level is a good way to address that. If your meetings don't have an agenda, or they fail to stick to it, or they don't issue clear actions or minutes before everyone has forgotten what was actually agreed, you need to start thinking about your meeting as a process, and in doing so, assign each of the tasks in that process to an accountable person. This won't solve your problem overnight, but by making somebody accountable for inputs, processes, and outputs, you'll have taken the first step towards improving it. Finally, if your meetings are often starting late because the last one overran, this could be because you aren't sticking to an agenda, but it could be because you've actually got too many meetings. A good way to tackle that problem is to challenge the reason why each person is there. Some of the people attending meetings may just be there to receive information, and you can address that in other ways through, for example, the better distribution of actions and minutes. Some people, however, will still need to be in lots and lots of meetings, and these key people you need to work on, get them to appoint deputies to attend some meetings on their behalf so that they can spread themselves more wisely. Using deputies who are empowered to reach decisions does require delegation of responsibility, and that isn't something that every manager finds easy to do. I'd like to describe one situation where that actually happened. One of our clients supplied printers of identity cards by cutting sheets of plastic from a roll, and what they were finding was a delay of up to 2 weeks by the need to get a senior manager's approval every time a customer ordered a slightly different size of plastic sheet. The client was actually losing business because many customers got fed up with this 2-week delay to delivery. It was an important decision. The dimensions of the sheet that the customer ordered affected how much scrap was generated in this process. So the manager's approval was necessary because she had accountability for profit and loss. But she was often out visiting customers, and she didn't really have time to catch up on the paperwork when she was back in the office. This wasn't the first thing she got around to doing. In lean terms, we would call her the bottleneck. And to remove the bottleneck, you need to ask 2 questions. Is the activity necessary, or could it be done by somebody else faster? Her decision was actually a very simple calculation. If the amount of scrap was less than 5%, they accepted the order. So that decision could be delegated down to frontline staff in customer service office. It took the work off her desk, eliminated the delay. It saved the frontline staff all the time they'd spent sending her requests and reminders when they didn't get a reply the first time. It also meant that the happier customers started to place more orders for a shorter lead time. Ultimately, all of the work a manager does in core business processes could be delegated down to frontline staff if it can be expressed in clear and simple ways, such as the one we just looked at. This requires clear and effective communication so that it's obvious what has to be done and people don't have to ask you each time they have a question. By doing this, you'll be eliminating the 8th waste, that of failing to make use of the talents of your staff. However, there is one big pitfall to avoid. If the work is truly waste, delegating it moves the monkey off your back but doesn't make it go away. All that happens is that somebody else has the waste added to their day. As managers, you have to be prepared to identify, challenge, and eliminate waste, not just push it down the organization until it finds the most junior person who can't resist. So in the client who was cutting plastic sheets out of a roll, when we looked at historic data with them and the type of customers they served, only about 0.5% of customer orders ever violated this scrap limit rule. And even those violations were by a very small amount. So in fact, they could comfortably eliminate the decision step and not merely delegate it. One easy way to delegate accountability down to the front line, increasing the speed of delivery and taking work away from managers, is to eliminate inspection by managers. Inspection is recognized classically as a waste. It doesn't change anything of any value to the product or service being delivered, but it does take time. That time creates delay and it uses up resources. And yet many managers will feel that they cannot trust their staff entirely, so they fill up their day with inspection and checking of their work. One government agency decided that case decisions taken by frontline staff were so important that every decision had got to be reviewed by a manager. After a few months, they started to panic because the backlog of overdue cases had built up and up. So the first reaction, of course, was to hire more staff. That's the obvious answer, isn't it? But then they stopped and thought for a moment, and they looked at the quality of decisions being reached. They actually found over time that the managers were overturning more and more initial decisions. And when they investigated, they found that the frontline staff had realized what was going on. They realized all their work was going to be checked. So they felt it didn't really matter what decision they originally took. Somebody else would make sure that the right decision was eventually taken. Initial quality suffered as a result of 100% inspection. And of course, there was no guarantee that every review decision taken by the managers was correct. Inspection doesn't always ensure the output itself is correct. Although that example there is an extreme one, it is actually true. But in every organization, every time we insist on checking, proofreading, monitoring, reviewing, or scrutinizing, we create delay. And by removing the accountability for quality of work from the people who actually do it, we do make quality just that little bit harder to achieve. Another core part of a manager's job is to prepare reports for other managers. Extracting the information takes time, and interpreting the data can take even longer. After all, we don't want the vice president to draw the wrong conclusions, or worse still, the right conclusions that make us look bad. So the challenge is, how can we strip reporting back to the essentials needed to communicate without confusion and in the simplest and most effective way? The lean way to share information is visually. A picture speaks 1,000 words, and it's also much quicker. However, as in this example, a bad or confusing image can fail to share the message that we want to deliver by hiding or confusing it. When reporting management information visually, the common way we do this is using dashboards. This is an example of a dashboard reporting the status of a company making and selling products. It isn't a very good one. Each of the charts uses a different style. Some are lines, some are bar charts. In some charts, the desired direction of improvement is up, and in others it's down, but I don't know which is which. In some charts there's a target, and in other charts there isn't. Several of the charts only have 2 or 3 data points, so I cannot really put the information in context and find out whether there's a trend. A lot of work went into preparing this dashboard, but most of it was wasted because it doesn't communicate effectively. At best, the reader is going to need an explanation, which means more work for the manager and the reader. Every time you pick up a dashboard and there are pages of explanation behind it, you fail to achieve the objectives. At worst, the reader will misunderstand the information here or even ignore it. Best practice for preparing a dashboard consists of a very few simple rules. Keep it simple, only have one metric on each chart. Define what is being measured. Have a target or a goal. Make it clear whether the improvement in each measure is an increase or a decrease. And show trends. I'll include enough data so that trends can be seen. This is an example of a dashboard which follows these rules. Every chart only plots one measure. Every measure is defined. There is no uncertainty about how it's been calculated. There is a goal for every measure, so performance can be judged against that goal. There's a red arrow beside each chart which indicates whether an increase or a decrease in the measure is desired. And each data series is long enough to show any trends. This dashboard is much easier to read, so the time spent preparing it wasn't wasted, and the person receiving it will understand what they have to do when they receive it. One of the ways many managers like to work is to balance lots of tasks at once. They feel they have to keep all the plates spinning. This certainly stops them from getting bored, but does it make them productive? On the screen here, you can see the results of a time study collected from project engineers. It was found that they spent about 1/3 of the time doing their core job when multitasking was low. But when multitasking was significant, the fraction of their time spent on core tasks dropped to only 1/6 of their working week. Amongst other reasons, this happens because they lose time mentally changing from one task to another, and because working on more things means they have more status reports to write. Both of these activities, changing between tasks and writing reports, are actually kinds of waste. We know that it's not possible to drive a car while sending a text message and applying lipstick. At least that's what the police officer told me when he pulled me over. Multitasking is equally hard at work, and it's equally destructive. You can reduce multitasking. You can avoid distractions in your working day. Although Outlook will beep to let you know another email has arrived, you don't have to look at it immediately. So long as you deal with those distractions in a reasonable time, maybe 2 or 3 times a day, so that any activities which need your decision don't get delayed, you'll be far more effective by concentrating on one task for a longer period without allowing yourself to be interrupted. Another way to make managers more productive is to work on less things at once. This is an application of Little's Law. Your capacity for work is fixed by how many hours you work and the skills you have. And if you want to get more work out of any particular person, those are the two things you can change. If you work on fewer things each week or month, you won't change how much you complete in the month, but you'll be able to devote more time to each and therefore complete those things faster. Over time, you'll still complete the same number of things because your capacity hasn't changed, but some of the things you will deliver will be faster and you will be delivering them faster than if you tried to work on everything at once. For this to work, you might have to delay the start of some things until you've finished other ones. It doesn't delay the finish of the later things because although you start them later, you'll still finish them no later than you would have done, which is what's shown on the graphic here. However, the delayed start of some tasks gives you more flexibility. Sometimes you start work on something that then becomes obsolete or gets cancelled. So if you've postponed the start of it, you haven't wasted any work in preparing something that then got cancelled. When was the last time you worked all weekend to meet a deadline on a project which then got binned? If you're curious to learn more about Little's Law, please check out some of our previous recorded webinars on YouTube, our YouTube channel, and infographics on our website. I've described so far several ways that as a manager you can make your life simpler and more effective. But I don't want to leave you with the impression that applying lean to the job of management will make your job boring, repetitive, or mundane. Yes, the non-value adding parts will be stripped away, and the value adding parts will be standardized so that the outcome is predictable. But this just allows managers to have more time to get on with value creation. By spending less time on non-value added work, you will have more time to add value. Think what you could accomplish with another hour a day to think about the problems facing your business. By standardizing the work, the outcome is predictable. Crises don't develop, or if they come at you from outside, you have more time to deal with them effectively. You might get an adrenaline fix from rushing from one fire to the next, but I'd rather have no fires to put out. By delegating to your staff and appointing deputies, you'll be able to complete work faster, and you'll be able to develop and grow your staff. This will have a benefit to you as well because it will free you up so you can get promoted. And by working on fewer things at once and finishing those things faster, your business will get the benefit of that work sooner, and you'll get recognition for the impact you've made. At your annual review, instead of having a list of many things which are half complete, you'll have a list of achievements which have actually been completed. So by applying lean principles, there's a lot of benefits to you individually as well as to your company. So in conclusions, in this webinar, we've looked at how you can enhance your productivity by identifying the waste in your work and then eliminating it using the few simple steps shown here. Standardizing work wherever possible to avoid misunderstandings. Through delegating essential work to others where they can do it faster and better, but being careful not to offload work which doesn't need to be done anyway. By cutting back on the amount of inspection and checking that you carry out. And through improving the clarity of reports, which again helps to avoid misunderstandings. By avoiding interruptions, and by working on fewer things at once so that each of them gets finished sooner. Each of these actions will increase the quality and amount that you get done, and it will cut the time it takes to do it. If you'd like to learn more about how to improve your productivity, please contact us for a copy of our new white paper, Delivering a More Efficient Business. And don't forget, we're on all the major social media platforms, so you can contact us through Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me today, and I'll now try to answer the questions that you've posted. If there are any other questions you have, to remind you, please type them into the chat box at the bottom left corner of your screen, and we'll make a start. I have questions from two people, from Bob and Alphonse. Thank you both, regarding the question of scrapping inspection. How can we ensure quality is high if we remove inspection? Won't it be dangerous? Compliance with ISO 9001, for example. Not necessarily. I think there are many ways to ensure quality of work, and a much more effective way is to eliminate the possibility for the mistake in the first place. So, in the case of the government agency, where the managers were checking all the work that was being done by frontline staff, they felt the reason that they were discovering case decisions that were made incorrectly was because the criteria for the case decision were not properly defined. Mistakes could arise because of a lack of clarity. So if you can eliminate the root cause of the problem, the need to inspect is removed as well. Inspection is not itself an effective way of finding defects. Many QC inspectors will say that there's always they can't sample everything. If they inspect everything, they will often, due to the overload, miss things. So if you can find a way to eliminate the need for inspection, you've got a far more robust, and you will deliver a better quality of result. I have a question from William. Thank you, William. If I'm delegating workloads to my staff to free up my time, what about the time of the staff I've delegated it to? If they're already busy, haven't I given them more work to do? There is that risk. However, in the example that I was describing, delegating the decision down to frontline customer service staff actually reduced the amount of work they had to do, because each time they had to escalate a decision up the chain, they had to prepare the case, seek approval, chase the manager when the manager didn't get back to them and the customer was on the phone saying, well, I need a decision. So they were actually spending more time managing the escalation of work up the chain than they would have been, than was necessary if they actually did the work themselves. So delegating work can actually reduce the time spent by both parts. But clearly it needs to be in balance and look at their existing workload as well. There may well be waste, and there may well be unnecessary activities in their own tasks that need to be removed, stripped out of your business processes as well. I hope I've answered those two questions that I've understood what you were driving at with the question, and that I've answered it okay. Do please contact me. There's my Twitter handle there. I would love to hear from you if I didn't answer those questions, and if you want to contact me further to refine them further. In your particular business situation, you may have a particular example that you were thinking of and like to think, how could this apply to yourself? I've got a question in here from one more question, which is, I talked about reducing the number of things you were working on, and it's quite difficult to imagine, well, how can you start to do that? Because you've got an existing load of stuff that you need to do, and you can't just stop it. Well, there's two ways you can reduce the number of things you're working on. One is to actually rationalize the things you're doing. Some of the things you're working on may no longer be relevant or as important as they were. And there's probably some things that you've been asked to do that really are drifting or are no longer needed. The justification for them has passed. If you can find those things and stop them, that's the first thing. And that's the common approach, for example, in project rationalization. The second thing you can do is, when you've finished one task, is one job, one deliverable, is not to start working on another one immediately until you've allowed the number of things you're working on to to reduce. So delay starting anything new until you've got until you've reached a target level for the number of live projects or live jobs that you're managing. And until you reach that point, don't start anything new. So that's two ways that you can reduce your workload while still continuing to deliver the things that your business is looking for. I don't think we've got any more questions this afternoon. So I'm going to draw this webinar to a close. I'd like to thank you for your time once again, to remind you to get in touch with us if there's any further discussion you'd like to have on the subjects raised, and that to also mention that a recording of this webinar will be available through our website very shortly. When I close the presentation, there will be a link that pops up which can take you to our website with some information on a training course on this subject, which 100% Effective are currently offering. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and have a great day.